Chris Whitty is warning people to pick the events they attend this Christmas carefully, he says, which, frankly, as advice goes, is about as much use as a chocolate teapot. I mean, that sort of thing works well, I think, as a veiled threat, doesn't it? You want to be very careful which events you were to attend this weekend. If I were you, I'd be picking my events. It sounds like something Ronnie and Reggie Kray would say, and they're essentially... It's understood that you're not supposed to go to the wrong nightclub, but how are you supposed to know what you're picking, what low COVIDness somehow?
Who gets to pick? I don't have any events. Who are these popular people
go to your event or not?
Well, you're almost implying our government a gangster sign, which I couldn't possibly sign off on, obviously. But what troubles me about it, though, is the fear element. I mean, these endless press conferences, I've started calling them stress conferences. I've coined that, to my knowledge. Yeah, as far as I know.
Good luck with that one.
Thank you. Because they're these endless terror bulletins that the government's become addicted to. So I have to sit through this one for my job, which is this. So the key question to me, the two key questions to me are, is Omicron mild and how do the vaccines respond to it?
Yeah.
And South Africa seems to imply that it is mild at the moment. And there was a study...
So South Africa in terms of the statistics or its own government's
Right,
response?
in terms of the findings of doctors in South Africa,
right, okay.
which Whitty sort of is implying we can't necessarily...
Don't listen to doctors. Come on now, we're too far into this.
You're right. I mean, look, there's the doctors that are saying it's mild in South Africa.
Yeah.
Then there's this study out of Denmark, the Telegraph have published, that 70% of people with Omicron in Denmark were under 40, and of those, 75% were vaccinated.
Right.
So the question is, how does it respond to the vaccine? These are the two key questions.
So it gets past the vaccine, but it's still mild when you have it. Yeah.
That's what these studies show.
Which is kind of ideal, right? This is what we've been saying for a few days now. This is exactly what we would hope would happen to
You would think, wouldn't you? Yeah. But the tone of the press conference was very much doom and gloom. I mean, Whitty said that hospitalisations were flat and deaths were down, but he kind of skipped over that because he's obviously saying it's too soon for that to be relevant. Yeah. Then the really interesting bit he got onto next was he said... This thing out of South Africa, this information, has been over-interpreted. And he claimed that the amount of immunity in South Africa for this wave, because of a prior Delta wave and vaccination, is far higher than it was for their last wave, and therefore the fact that there's a lower hospitalisation rate is unsurprising. So I've been trying to merely interpret that, let alone over-interpret it.
Is he talking about? Is it a bit like the dry tinder situation? If you have a warm winter, then the next one when there's a cold snap, a load of people who should have died the year before.
So you said Tinder, and I was looking at my phone to check it out.
I think it's something like that, but me and many people on the internet have struggled to understand this. I may just be not smart enough, but he seems to be saying that, because they've had it before, we can ignore their hospitalisation rates, and that's not relevant to us. But the rate, to me, rate is a key word there, because he's saying, OK, their rate's going to be different. But what about just in absolute terms? If they're finding the virus is mild, the Omicron is mild, then it's probably going to be mild here.
You just get a feeling, don't you? And I mean, I don't want to kind of like delve too deep into feelings, because I haven't done the reading, but I do get the sense that there are people who just desperately want this to be more serious, more of a concern, more of a restriction on our liberty and our normal way of life. And, I'm not being kind of, like the Great Reset about it, but there just doesn't seem to be any enthusiasm for addressing the actual facts. It all just seems to be...
This could be a good... It could be a good thing.
Yeah.
This could burn out the virus.
Yeah, and yet nobody within the political... I mean, I think Steve Baker's virtually the only guy who's saying that he doesn't think that we should, throw everything in the kitchen sink at this. Both Keir Starmer and Boris are coming out.
Right,
What's going on?
Well, you could argue there's perverse incentives for the mainstream media to keep these kind of things going. One could argue. And you also... I would never suggest this, but you look at two things. You go, one, are they just pushing their booster? I mean, they're very obviously pushing the booster that constantly says, get your booster on the screen. Yeah. So that's sort of out in the open. But the other question is, I've heard a lot about this January 5th lockdown. So a cynic or people on my parts of the internet could say they are creating the necessary fear for the January 5th lockdown. And that's become mainstream because it was in Alison Pearson's column in the Telegraph. So it's not a wild conspiracy theory to say that they're planning another lockdown. Although lots of people say no one will go along with it, so it'll be interesting to see.
I can't help feeling that this is partly because Boris's mode, his established mode, is this, let's get Brexit done. What we really need now is everyone to get a boost. What we need is everyone to get jabbed. What we need, and he really likes these punchy, basic sort of messages. And they distract you, of course, because we know he's having a torrid time.
I mean, the thing that is genuinely of a safety concern, if it's suddenly, as it is, going crazy and so many people have it, there are concerns of the staff being, NHS staff being able to, enough to be able to keep things going. That is a real concern.
But it has been a real
even
concern
if it's mild.
every single winter.
That's true, but even if it's mild, but
Yeah.
if it's this much more contagious and whatever, there is this window of enough people having it that really could.
If the booster actually has the desired effect, because studies out of Denmark are showing that the booster is actually not working. So that's the big question: does the booster work?
I think there's a lot of the big growth here is that you finally admit that COVID exists. I think that's really.